production. Keeping you ahead of technology. Enjoy the show.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today's episode of Broadcast to Post. I'm your host, Jeff Sengpil, Chief Technologist here at Keycode Media. We have an incredibly smart panel of engineers in this video discussing shared storage for media teams. We'll get into explaining key considerations when designing a shared storage ecosystem, media management, archive, or cloud workflow. Before we get to the panel, let's briefly review some terms and your pain points that your teams have to consider when selecting shared storage. What are all these three-letter acronyms and what do they mean? Shared storage has been around for quite a while. Quite simply put, it's all your team working off of one set of media, one set of drives. The SAN, or Storage Area Network, has been around forever and is a dedicated performance tier of storage and connectivity solution that has no other traffic. It utilizes infrastructure such as fiber channel. Then there are network-attached storage systems, or NAS. These began as simply storage sitting behind a computer made available to everyone on a network, and they have morphed over time to ultra-high-speed solutions that provide much more than just a repository of files. They are key to many media and entertainment workflows, and some offer many intriguing add-ons for workflow and asset management, and provide speeds at or above the SAN solutions that are available today. The interesting thing about NAS is that while they were born and raised as on-prem workflows, as the market has shifted, NAS is also the storage mechanism for cloud. Cloud storage today ranges from simple buckets of storage available at various speeds and accessibility levels to full media-style file systems living and acting like they did when they were on-prem, but available to creative workstation systems running in the cloud. They utilize it directly and at incredible speeds. And there are now options in technology that have developed where a cloud NAS or bucket can have a file system in front of it that allows even large files to be streamed to creative workstations that are not cloud-based at your home or at the facility. Collaboration, ease of media management, cost savings, they're all part of a shared storage workflow. Saving money on storage, saving money on the time not spent trying to manage it all adds up to lower costs and higher productivity. As Keycode, we have some things that we typically ask. Who's going to need access to what, and are they on-prem or working from home? What are the types and sizes of the files each editor actually needs? What's the delivery? Is it multiple file format delivery, producer or client review, and approved functionality, and then archive? Do you need certain workgroups or users to be limited to read-only access? On backups, do the projects you are working on require backups in process, archives at the end? How are you maintaining safety from hardware problems, slipped finger deletions, and ransomware? Are you planning to be 100% in the cloud? Then let's talk about how to lift and shift. It will ease your backup and security concerns, but you do need to plan for those things today. And of course, your people, the employees, editors, colorists, producers, AEs, PAs. How do we get all these people adopting a shared system, a shared workflow and process, creating extraordinary content without getting slowed down by technical issues? The point of all these questions is to get you to the best solutions and best workflow to keep your business or productions humming along. Our panel today will be diving in deep as to how answering all of these questions are going to benefit your team. But before that, why is Keycode Media dropping the shared storage knowledge on you today? Well, Keycode Media has been the preferred US reseller and integrator for the post-production industry for 20 years, and our nationwide team of engineers are experienced in helping companies design, install, upgrade, and maintain the technology necessary to operate a well-oiled production operation. A post-production system that just works so your team can focus on the creative, while we handle the shared storage, edit suites, color suites, audio suites, and asset management equipment, either hosted on-prem or also in the cloud, and hybrid methods as well. Before we get started, we want to give a shout out to our partners that are assisting with this discussion: Avid, SNS, and Quantum. Keycode Media is the go-to resource for installation and support for their shared storage solutions, and we can't thank them enough for their support. Okay, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and then we'll return with our panel.
In a world where content is king, creators shouldn't have to put up with subpar media storage and broken workflows that keep them tethered to their edit bay. Evo is the high-performance shared storage and cloud workflow solution that gives professional content creators the speed, capacity, and workflow tools they need to create amazing content faster from anywhere. From Fortune 500 companies to first-time filmmakers, creative teams of all sizes in over 80 countries worldwide produce their best creative work with Evo and the included Evo suite of workflow tools. With Evo, you get Share Browser, the powerful and easy-to-use media asset manager, to help your whole team search, preview, tag, comment, organize, and share media. You also get native project locking features to prevent collaborators from overwriting in-progress work. A robust API and automations engine to perform your backups, transcodes, and replication jobs automatically, leaving you free to focus on more creative tasks. And a variety of remote editing and cloud workflow tools to keep your team creating from wherever they need to be. Evo offers a better remote editing experience for your creative team with automatic Apple-certified ProRes transcoding, creating edit-ready proxies perfect for multi-site, off-prem, and hybrid workflows. And Evo works seamlessly with industry-leading applications like Adobe Premiere Pro and After Effects, DaVinci Resolve, Final Cut Pro, Avid Media Composer, Pro Tools, and more. There's even a Share Browser integration for Premiere, After Effects, Final Cut, and Resolve, so you can access your media and metadata without ever leaving your NLE. What's more, the Evo suite of software tools is included free with Evo, so there aren't any per-seat license fees that make your system more expensive as you expand your team. And we back our customers with the best support in the industry. From consultative purchase support, to remote installation and training, to 24/7 tech support options, we are dedicated to helping you get the most out of your Evo shared storage workflow server. Customers all over the world use Evo every day to create incredible movies, documentaries, reality TV, and instructional, promotional, and worship videos. From universities to broadcasters, game developers, and governments, Evo helps creative teams everywhere create amazing content faster. Call us today or visit snsevo.com to see how Evo can improve your team's creative workflow.
Nexus is such a huge part of our success because the efficiencies and the speed and the flexibility, that's just a massive game changer and continues, I think, to be a competitive advantage.
The world is rapidly changing. Now, in addition to working together in an on-premises production environment, cloud-enabled workflows and remote collaboration are becoming more essential to keep your business operational and relevant. Demand for content continues to skyrocket, as does viewer consumption across multiple screens, and your media storage must adapt to your new requirements. Whether you're creating content for feature films, TV, online, or broadcast news, your team needs the ability to work collaboratively, regardless of their location, to deliver it fast. Avid Nexus leads the media industry with the most comprehensive solution for tiered media storage, on-premises, and all the way to the cloud. You can enable hundreds of editors, assistants, journalists, producers, and other contributors to work together in real time using Avid Nexus, integrated seamlessly with Avid Media Composer, editorial management, and Media Central. Expand your workflows on Avid Nexus with other creative tools from companies including Adobe, Apple, Autodesk, Blackmagic Design, and others. Optimized to accelerate collaboration for high-quality production, teams can produce content faster and your business can achieve better efficiency and security across flash, online, nearline, and cloud storage tiers. And using Avid patented technology, you can quickly tailor and tune workspace capacity, performance, and drive protection to meet the latest challenges without disruption or downtime to the creative process. Avid Nexus, it's the media industry's most trusted storage solution.
Whether you're in surveillance and physical security, surfacing insight from protected video, media and entertainment, pushing collaboration to the edge to tame complex workflows. Enterprise IT, guiding and protecting the flow of company and customer data on every device, in every location around the world. Life sciences, sifting massive data sets and optimizing pipelines to turn thought and discovery into action. Or in government, where service and mission combine all of these workflows to meet evolving needs. Your digital content is expanding at a rate that was unimaginable just a few short years ago. Storing and protecting that data is incredibly important, but so is getting a clear vision across all your data. To unlock insight and facilitate collaboration, you need to place it at the right place, at the right time, dynamically adding value to that data. Integrating data with your expertise, solutions, AI, and machine learning is the key to the next wave of differentiation for your organization. Quantum knows that your data is your fuel for innovation. We're enabling the world of enriched data, giving it greater visibility and meaning, providing an accelerant to grow your business exponentially. And we developed a comprehensive, end-to-end, enriched data and intuitive storage platform. A platform that orchestrates, catalogs, stores, and protects, delivering a new class of data customized to meet the demands of your digital business to help you accelerate your expertise across all environments, up to petabytes or even zettabytes. With over 40 years of data expertise, no one understands the complexity and continual evolution of data like quantum. The possibilities are as endlessly alive as your data. Welcome to the enriched world of living data, where your difference is in your data.
Big thanks to our sponsors for making this episode possible today. Now, let's introduce the panel for our exciting topic. Our guest speaker today is Craig Wilson. He's the Production and Creative Services Director for the St. Louis Cardinals. Craig manages just about everything technical for the Cardinals, including decisions for the cameras, broadcast control room, as well as video editing. He's been managing for 17 seasons with the Cardinals and will be discussing the long-term strategy for success, considering the shift in products and workflow he's had to go through the years. Also joining us is Chad Whitaker from Keycode Media. With Avid ACSR Elite certification and over 12 years of experience in the post-production and IT industries, Chad has shown a strong ability to manage some of the largest project installs for Keycode Media clients. His support experience ranges from basic all the way to enterprise-level installations of multi-stack Nexus, SNS, or Quantum shared storage. And me, I come with extensive knowledge in the world of all aspects of post-production. There's very few genres I haven't worked with or shared storage platforms I haven't used. I've also been working in shared storage since it became a thing, with names like MediaShare and Transoft.
Five, four.
All right, everybody. Sorry about the audio problems earlier. And just to reiterate, we're not getting deep into products. This is about the topics that engineers care about. So let's get things kicked off. Start with the basics. Craig, what's your overall thought process that goes into choosing shared storage for a video production? What types of questions do you think engineers need to ask themselves about the creative processes prior to building out an ecosystem?
A lot of what we focus on here is workflow. You know, I was hired in 2006 when the building was built, and we had nothing. You know, they had maybe a low-level Avid, and that was it, and everything's local storage. So when I came on, it was local storage. We had 1 edit station, 2 edit stations, something like that. And for us, it was just years of evolution of seeing how things go, because you know, obviously you wouldn't want to put in a bunch of shared storage for when you don't need, you know, a lot of capacity or anything like that. But over the years, we started, you know, having another workstation. We were sharing projects, but then, you know, the media had to get copied back and forth between the different local media, that, you know, local drives that we had. So after a while, that became a pressure point of, hey, we can't move forward unless we have some shared storage. And that was really how, you know, we were introduced to that. But, you know, not being a real production company, it's a little bit harder to get everybody on board on that immediately and just say, hey, this is how we want to make this go out and stuff like that, because it took some education along the ways of everybody to kind of say, this is how this should work, and this is how we want it to work, and this is going to give us back what we need out of it.
Yeah, and one of the other things I've always discovered is, the cost. You've got, say, 10, back in those days, it was, I've got 18 gigs of media and I need to have 4 different people being able to work off of it. That was a stack of drives, because we were talking about 9 terabyte and then later 18 terabyte drives. So just getting that honed down to be really one set of media and a little bit of render stuff on the outside, it saved a lot of money on the spinning disks in the long run. That's even without a shared projects. If it's shared media, that's kind of a great incentive to go there.
Capacity also was a big thing too. It gave you enormous amounts of new feature thing that you could do, or the ability to do things a lot better and everything that way too. So
exactly. And back in those days, it was fiber channel, and that was kind of all new. And once you get it dialed in, it was a great kind of deal. Chad, from the install perspective, what are some of the questions you find that customers have glossed over or miss before the deployment begins for a new storage solution?
To me, it's always been location. There's a lot of times where you need to make sure that you're going from just having local drives on your desk to actually having a rack-mounted shared storage solution, and it's going to need a proper rack. It's going to need proper HVAC. I think that those things are two things that get glossed over pretty easily, just because it can be big and new and a bit of an unknown. And the other thing is, nowadays everything is network based. Like everything that we do is or almost everything that we do is based off your network, and so making sure that you're planning accordingly for your network that you have now and where your network will need to be in the future as well are important things that a lot of people just aren't aware of. It's something that can't be ignored these days, though.
Yeah, definitely not. And Chad, you guys had some HVAC fun when you guys did your rework of the stadium control room, right?
Yeah. So when we were installed in 2006, it was just an architect that built out what we're going to do, and there really wasn't a lot of fixing what we knew was going to be wrong at the time. But you just kind of handed a stadium and like, here, this is what you get. So when we did our 10-year renovation, we're like, okay, we're going to get things right this time. We're going to do what we need to do. And even if you were to look at the footprint of what the control room was then to what it was today, it's like, oh my gosh, look how everything got done right, But one of the biggest issues that we had is we kind of redesigned the room, kind of got everything like we wanted to, and then we brought in the HVAC guy, and he goes, no, this won't work. You can't do this. This isn't going to be any good. So we basically started with what he wanted to do, which was, hey, make your racks face inside, put a roof on it, put a door, get everything exactly the way you want. And then we move forward from that, and people still come into our control room and like, wow, this is a great rack room. It works well. But, also it's maintenance on the computers, we don't have dust, our HVAC units, we have 2 Liebert units that I've been to other stadiums now too, that have the same amount of equipment, but then they aren't doing it right. And they have, 3 to 4 times the amount of air conditioning too. So you're saving money also by designing it correctly and using less air conditioning at that time.
Yeah.
Definitely. And the other thing also is, when you get a chance to engineer the space as opposed to it growing organically, there's a lot of changes you can kind of put into place, which you can't do when you've got an operating facility, you're just beginning to expand. So getting into cloud and hybrid, how is everyone working from home, playing into shared storage decisions? Are we just connecting our AWS bucket with our shared storage? How do we go about being cost efficient with these cloud solutions, which are often, going to charge us egress for up and down and for computing power? So I'll take on this one at first. One of the big challenges for a lot of people has been how we've been able to move forward in the pandemic. And some of the easy solutions were just copy everything on local drives and send it home. And that's where we discovered that we kind of went back to the 90s. That didn't work for us. So a number of solutions are out there where you could bounce things off of the cloud. So you still have your source of truth back at your facility with all of your storage, and that's where your ingest takes place. But then either proxies are sent out or full res files are sent out to local folks. And the piece that a lot of people discovered is they didn't necessarily have a lot of network bandwidth at facilities because they weren't really set up to operate in this manner. They're used to having all sorts of people there working on the facility. It's, you're at the ranch, you just work there. So it became kind of sensible where instead of having to have everyone trying to log jam into the facility, you would just go and tell, let's set up a bucket. We will copy things to the bucket, and then from the bucket, we can go out to everybody, which cut down on the bandwidth. There's only one copy coming out of the facility, maybe, a couple copies coming in, but those aren't a huge amount of pieces. So that's one of the ways that people have done that, and Storage DNA had a workflow that worked out pretty well for that, as did our friends with SNS. So what also has evolved are ways to put file systems in front of cloud storage to allow, things to be streamed directly. There's also been, a number of different solutions where you're copying media, but then your projects are shared. There's some interesting things on the horizon that are going to come out in terms of this shared project mentality. And there's also, the good old-fashioned, well, not good old-fashioned, it's still new for a lot of folks, but you have your storage and your edit systems actually up in the cloud full. So, and that is where you're usually looking at, dealing with a service provider that has all of those features. It's got the compute that has all the systems, and you're running your editing application actually in the cloud on the storage that is also in the cloud. Then it's just a matter of figuring out how you're getting things up into that cloud and down in a cost-effective manner. And there's some interesting solutions around that. Some people are doing camera to cloud, though usually those are not the same buckets that you end up getting into for storage. So then cloud to cloud movement is kind of important. And we've been working with a few vendors about how cloud to cloud movement can happen. And that also allows you to move things from your primary bucket into an archive bucket later on, because the easy way, especially if someone else owns your content, the easiest thing is to take your tier one stuff that's finished and say, let me just dump this into your bucket, your Glacier bucket or your archive bucket, and then you're done. You don't have to physically deliver anything. It's just all there. Any other thoughts on cloud and hybrid?
Yeah, we're trying to move that way. I was at NAB of 4, 5, 7 years ago or whatever, and somebody talked to me about that, and I was like, "That's what? Huh? No way." But yeah, over time you start thinking about it more and more. We do work with MLB does provide, they make their own media asset management tools and stuff like that, and so we're trying to work with them to be able to use that NAM, and then also they're trying to go cloud wise also, which obviously in a COVID kind of world that's perfect. Everybody can work anywhere in the world at that point, and it's fine. So we're interested in it. It's still MLB has to be able to make it work for themselves, and eventually they roll it out to us teams and stuff like that. But it's definitely on the radar. It's just not for us. It's just kind of a slow process. But we do have a lot of good, smart people at MLB to help us out along the way to figure out how things should go.
Awesome. So one other thing that's always been a thing is connectivity. Fiber channel was mentioned, and I worked on fiber channel back in the days when it originally was copper. But is that the same as Ethernet on fiber? What are the fastest connections today, and what do you think that the future is going to look like connectivity-wise going forward? Chad, let's jump in with you on that.
A lot of one of the things that to kind of loop it back to what we were talking about before, that I come across that can be confusing with people that are moving into shared storage is the fiber channel versus fiber over Ethernet versus just Ethernet. And without getting too much into the weeds, fiber channel is exclusively a SAN product, and a lot of people don't know about it because it's expensive and it takes time to really get it dialed in and to get it working correctly, and it needs some massaging to get it really to where it needs to be. Modern, I don't know if I should say modern, but the more the usual installations that we do nowadays are based off Ethernet, which is what everybody understands to just be, networking, what we come across all the time. And while fiber channel back in the day could get you higher bandwidth, a lot of Ethernet solutions now are much more common to have 10 gig and 25 gig that get you better than fiber channel. And they're a lot easier to configure, a lot easier to manage. Generally, Ethernet is what we'll see nowadays. But back in the day, and even still in some cases, there are still fiber channel installs. And if you need what's called block level, if you need your computer to recognize that the storage is though it was directly attached to your computer, if that's a requirement, then sometimes fiber channel is what you need. But it can be a lot more expensive because you're looking at port licensing, special hardware that just does your fiber channel. Like I can plug in an Ethernet-based Avid into any normal network switch and we're fine. If you need to then route that, to someone's home, if they're working from home, if you need a VPN, it's all very easy to configure. And fiber channel doesn't really give you that flexibility unless you spend a lot of money. So connectivity, yeah, it's I don't even want to say it's the way of the future. It is what we do now. Networking, especially with everybody working from home, it is what we do now. And having a good solid network, however you need to manage that is going to be something very important with your shared storage. So yeah.
Craig, you've been down the same road I have, moving from the old days to the new days. Where are you folks at in terms of connectivity?
Yeah, when we were in the control room, basically with our office and our Avids, that we just had a few of them there, 3 or 4. They were all Ethernet connected. It was too easy. We're too close. It's too simple of a solution, and that served most purposes of what we were doing. But then, when we moved out of there, our office now is down the stadium concourse a ways. There's 2 offices that we have now. So we did fiber connectivity, and basically we're just in a giant TV studio, for all broadcasts that happen here. So everybody understands the fiber, except the part of, you need connectors on both ends to make it work, so it's not just the fiber run, but you got to get all the equipment to go with it too. But so yeah, most of our now 13 Avids, except for a couple of them, are all fiber connected. And obviously that's great. It works, that kind of speed on what we're doing. We're not doing 4K or anything like that. So so it does great. We've been really happy with that, and it's super, super solid.
Which
and that, go ahead.
Sorry, which I kind of mentioned a little bit, but I didn't really go into detail about that. When you say fiber connected, you mean fiber over Ethernet.
Right, exactly. Sorry. Yeah.
So it can be confusing. Fiber channel is specifically for SAN. If you're using Ethernet over a fiber cable, like the medium of fiber, then there you go.
And the other thing that comes into play here is, a lot of times I've had discussions with folks and they say, well, we've got fiber in. And I'll ask, well, how fast does it go? And they don't have an answer for that question. So then the next thing I have to ask them is, what color is it? And if the response is orange, then that's going to max out. I mean, that's really going to do 4 gigs fiber channel really well, maybe 8 gigs over short runs. But once you start trying to push fiber over Ethernet down that at 10 gigs or greater, it's not going to behave correctly. You're going to get lots of crosstalk and your connectivity is going to fail. I was involved with an install where we just upgraded and crossed over, and suddenly we discovered none of this worked. And it worked for probably the better part of a decade. And then getting into, the 10 gig and greater connectivity, and that's that OM3 fiber, that's cyan. Then there's folks that have, yellow fiber, which is single mode, which can do all sorts of interesting speeds, but there's specialized transceivers, and they also can give you an amateur LASIK procedure if you don't be careful with them. And then you're getting it now into the days where, OM5 fiber being able to carry 25, 40, 50, 100 gig worth of connectivity down a, that single pair, which is, it's amazing these days. And, back in the day, I remember looking at okay, where do we upgrade out of our 16 gig fiber channel switches? And the only answer was 32 gig. And the only price tag was, oh my goodness, that's not going to happen. And then, fiber over Ethernet came along and they started doing, 50 gigs, 100 gigs. And I've been talking with some clients on some of the high-end finishing stuff as to, hooking them up as fiber, Ethernet over fiber at 50 gigs. So getting that there, and if you're rebuilding a fiber infrastructure, planning for the future is probably a really good idea. OM5 is out there, SFP28. So getting that infrastructure ready for being able to move forward is a good deal, even if you're still living in a 10 gig world. It's not going to be 10 gigs forever. So nonlinear editing, it's been around forever. Computer OS, Mac versus PC. Does this even matter anymore? Does the choice of the NLE and the operating system still factor into your decision making for storage? Craig, you want to take a point on that one?
Yeah, I mean, we're an Avid house, and I've worked with Avid since '94 or so, and then every day of my life, probably since about '98 on. So we've been PC for the most part. I mean, we were early days, that's all you had, that's all you did. But we jumped over to PC, and now that we're in some office environments and stuff like that, I've been more wanting to be PC, staying PC than jumping back. But anymore, it made a difference with some of the ways some of the features were rolled out and stuff. But not anymore. I mean, for us, it's just not. I mean, our graphic designers use Macs, but they're limited connectivity to a lot of the stuff that's on our network that we have to have, because we're trying to incorporate with EDS a lot of times and a bunch of other things like that. So we're trying to keep things a little more similar at times to do that, just to not have to battle that. The other thing too is all my years of PC troubleshooting, not so good at a Mac troubleshooting anymore. So I definitely have a more advantage of the PC side now.
And that really kind of just at the OS level on the Avid has always been cross-platform. Since the early days of because PCs came along after shared storage was in existence already for them, so they that doesn't care about it. Some of the other solutions that are out there, it does matter because it's going to affect how you're mounting and how certain project structures work, and whether or not you've got pathing that's different, and that's also one of the things that's out there. Whether or not the path looks different, because on a Mac you end up with volumes that mount under root volumes, and then there's your volume. So that's the path. And then there's other folks that are mounting as drive letters on PCs. And then there's the UNC path you can mount, which is, name of your Ethernet-ish storage or the IP address, and then, the name of the actual volume you've got. So that's kind of one of the things you need to look out for, moving into those environments that are not Avid storage. Avid storage doesn't care about those generally. So that's one of the things you got to kind of think of when you're thinking about that.
One of the things that happened to us during COVID was, because we weren't, we needed to do some editing. It wasn't anything spectacular or anything, but we didn't really have a good solution. And then we came across the RGS thing because our computers were HP already. And that worked great, but then I struggled with the graphic designers couldn't do that because we didn't.
Right.
Is there even a great solution to do a VNC with a Mac anymore that's at high res?
There's Jump Desktop. There's some solutions out there. We're going to have to talk after the call.
Yes.
I was trying to hold myself back because I was like, "Oh, we need to talk about RGS and connectivity." I was like, "Wait, no, not this call. This is something else later."
And that is true that sitting here in Burbank in the heart of the Hollywood community, a lot of folks were Mac, and some decisions were made to make those changes to make remote work easier, which for certain folks with certain storage that wasn't a problem at all. Other folks, they had to kind of rethink how the storage was going to be mounted and how that was going to play nice and how the conform process was going to work. So it can play a factor there with remote work as well. One of the other factors out there is, archive. We always try to push folks to begin to archive at the beginning and archive throughout, basically keeping your backups. Archive early, archive often. In the past, it was LTO or tape libraries, but now a lot of people are looking at cloud. Panelists, what are your thoughts on archive into the cloud? Craig, you want to go first on that?
Yeah, it's another one of those concepts. It's like, yeah, it's building and it's getting to be interesting with it. When we were here when we get our interplay set up, we did LTO6 and now we're LTO8. And even back in the early days of Avid, we used DLT, and exabyte tape. So, I mean, we've done, obviously that's always been ever since it was file-based kind of editing, we've always wanted to do some sort of backup. I mean, we've always had to have some sort of way to maintain your storage and, whatever storage, if it was local or shared, so that you're not filling it up constantly or being able to bring projects back. That was a big deal, especially when I was doing a lot of agency work and stuff. So we worked our workflow here about backup too. We used to have less online shared storage, and we were backing things up and then deleting and making a proxy and then deleting the high res so that we could reuse the storage and not have a whole lot of storage. But once we got the number of workstations that we had, it started to become too cumbersome. We had LTO6, we had 80, 100 tapes, and we had to switch them out too much, and people were kind of leery about them, especially me, about people touching the LTO tapes. So now we ended up getting 750 terabytes of storage, which has served us well now for a while. And but yeah, I mean, that's always another way. I mean, everything's probably going to go cloud way, and it's just takes time to get there.
Yeah, it does. And one of the things that's interesting is still today, LTO, which is tape, the cheapest way to archive, cost per terabyte. However, you have to think about the long-term plan. I have 3/4-inch videotapes that have been sitting around for a long time in my public storage. They're probably still good. They're videotaped, they're rewound, it should be okay. However, finding a 3/4-inch deck these days is difficult. So the same thing happens when we get into LTO. So if you have everything on LTO and it's a certain vintage of LTO, as technology moves forward, your tapes are going to be fine, but can you find an actual deck, LTO deck that can play that, or LTO drive that can pull that data back? So you have to look at the idea that every once in a while you're going to need to take all of your old LTOs and repack them. So that's something that is kind of into the longer term investment with LTO. So then when you talk about cloud, one of the things there's a couple different types of cloud archive. One of them is what we call the insurance check archive. We have backed up everything, and it's over here. It's sitting on extremely low-cost cloud storage. But if we need to pull it back, it's going to be expensive as all get out. So we only are going to go and get that if something drastic has happened to the primary facility. And we've got an insurance check. We've bought the new storage to replace what has been lost, and now we're going to pay to copy all this stuff back. So that's one of the things you need to think about. And if you are needing to go back to your storage on a regular basis, so say if you're looking for clips, 2-3 times a week, you need to think about what the structure is going to look like and what that cost of your egress is going to look like, because the slowest and least expensive cloud storage is the most expensive to pull back from. And it takes the most amount of time generally, though our friends at AWS have a new tier of Glacier that's out there, Glacier Instant Access. You're going to pay a little bit more. But the point being, you need to look at, okay, how much am I going to need to pull back on a regular basis, and figure that into the cost structure. Or maybe say, the stuff I'm going to need to pull back on a regular basis, I'm going to have on LTO. And the stuff that I may need to only pull back in case of a catastrophic problem, I've got that out in the cloud. So that also raises the question of, okay, how do your backups get structured in terms of what your data is? Chad, you want to share some thoughts on that?
Yeah, you always want to think ahead. and have a proper workflow and kind of plan these things out. And back in the day, we used to just, okay, we've got a workspace and we've got all of our media on it, but we need to free up that media. So just back up the whole thing and just get it to LTO and forget about it. But then you might have issues coming to restore. Like you're saying, restore can be costly, it can be time consuming. And so there are solutions out there that are just project based. And those projects, a lot of times they're primarily either Premiere or Avid. And instead of restoring all of your media and having to go through if you're using LTFS, which is the file system that's built on the LTO, it's a lot easier. But if you're going back to older versions, you might be just using just LTO, and it can go through, you might have 24 tapes in a set. You might have to load up all those tapes, and it can be wildly time consuming and frustrating. And if you're bringing back an entire workspace, it can be a nightmare. And so project-based workflows can save you a lot of time, because it's only going to restore only the media that was in Avid. It will be like, okay, I can open up your bins. I can see what media needs to be restored to fill out these bins. And that's all that it will restore. And it saves so much time and frustration and headache. And sometimes it works for your workflow. Sometimes it doesn't. It's things that need to be planned out like that can really save you a lot of headache down the line.
Yeah, and I was an archive customer. I had one of the first storage DNA LTO systems before they had the project restore. And someone would come to me and say, "Well, we need to bring this project back, and we need it quickly." And I'd have to look at it and say, "I think that project is spread over these 4 different workspaces. I've got to pull everything back," and that would take a little while. Nowadays, you can just say, well, give me the XML, give me the AF, and you throw it at it. It goes through and says, oh, here's your files as the bundle, which is much more efficient way to restore.
Absolutely.
And other folks now are able to restore partial files depending upon what the source media is. So that's also a wonderful thing. Instead of, I've got 20 seconds of a 3-hour clip, so I can get that 20 seconds and a little bit of handles as opposed to all 3 hours. That saves you time and space. So there's a lot of things to get into with archives. So now that we've got the storage installed and commissioned, and hopefully by our amazing KeyCode Media engineering team, what's the long-term strategy going to be? What processes and roles within an organization are going to be absolutely essential when it comes to managing this collaborative post-production network? Is it just about having a solid asset management layer above it, or is there going to be more to it? Chad, what are your thoughts on what you've seen clients do in terms of new roles and new positions?
I mean, I've had it where you just get a small, Nexus Pro, and it's pretty easy to manage. And then we've got, higher tiers where you've got SNS and you've got your share browser that's automating some of that. A lot of times I feel that it's important to have someone that really does manage your media, whether it's a very experienced AE. Some places I know have a guy that sits in the room and just manages data all day long. And as that storage grows, because it's very similar to the roads here in LA, no matter how many lanes you put in, more cars will fill it up. A lot of times with storage, you're going to fill up that data and you're going to have to expand, and you're going to have to make sure that you have ways that you can find your media, that you can manage restores, that you can make sure that it's cleaned up. A lot of times it takes a person, sometimes a dedicated person, to make sure that works out properly over the years. It's definitely something that needs to be, looked at in the long term.
Definitely. Craig, any thoughts on that?
I agree completely. I mean, with the addition of all this other hardware and everything and all that you're doing, you overlook that you need someone to manage it. And unfortunately, that's been me, so I've kind of had to grow into this role. I don't do it very well. I try to get as much information out of people when they're here to pick their brain about what I need to be doing and stuff. But we're always trying to move in those, we get you guys out here every so often to help us clean it up. And, every time some Avid guy comes out here, he shows me things of, hey, you should be doing this. And it's like, oh yeah, you really should, to keep it healthy. The Nexus system is a lot better, more bulletproof than the previous system was, but yeah, and the archiving is a whole nother project too. I mean, we try to keep up on it, and we archive huge amounts of highlights and game records, and plus all the production that we do. So it's a lot of weeding through because we really don't have the editors do it. So we have somebody go through and we try to organize everything a certain way so that these archivists can go through and grab the footage that they need, throw it over to the LTO, transcode it, and get everything going. But it definitely, you don't think about it, but yeah, there's a need for a person to be able to manage it.
And it's cost too. I mean, you the whole idea of shared storage is that it's going to save you money in the long term because it's going to give you a workflow that saves you time and money. And then to think of it in that way, if you've got, like you're saying, you've got all this media that needs to be archived, restored, backed up, managed. If it gets to the point where you're wasting time not being able to find your data quickly, I mean, it's going to save you money in the long run if you have someone that knows what they're doing with that storage.
And God forbid, if something happens, if you're not backed up, then you've lost. I mean, for us, a lot of that game data is some of it's irreplaceable, some of it's highlights, but a game record, I'm going to have trouble getting some of that stuff back. So, at some point it's like, that stuff's gone for good and you never get it back.
Yeah, over my lifetime, I know that I've deleted so much irreplaceable media because it was just on a consensus. We don't need this anymore. Off it goes. And of course, 6 months later, hey, do we still have that shot of?
People have the ability to delete off our system. Me and one other person, and that's
it.
Exactly. Well, I mean, it's a consensus. We're not using this anymore. It's time to go. Well, that will never exist again. It's not on tape anywhere. All right, so. Let's get into some of our questions from the audience. John McLean is asking, what about 4K, HDR, larger file types? How does that play into designing an environment? Chad, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, I mean, there's going back to, whether you're Ethernet versus fiber channel, that, and depends on what bandwidth you need. 4K, you're going to need a lot. It doesn't seem, it seems like, oh yeah, I'll just need 4 times the bandwidth. And then if I'm doing just regular HD, it does not really work that way. And if you're talking about HDR, you also are going to need to make sure that you've got the ability to read those tags. And when, on your current hardware, it can really balloon up fast, the requirements for bandwidth and the requirements for storage space. Those are definitely things that nowadays, when I go and I speak to a client, we'll start off with, are you going to be just editing in 1080 or are you planning to edit in 4K? Are you planning to view HDR? Because it changes the whole aspect of what you really require. It's something that if you can, I'll just keep ramming that point home. If you can plan ahead for that, it will save you time and money. We've got we've had clients where they plan for a big upgrade and they plan for 1080 and then have to change that workflow to 4K workflow, and it requires added hardware, added storage space, sometimes new client machines. It can be a bit daunting to make that jump, but it's just something you have to plan for.
And daunting was the word I was going to use there. One of the things, I mean, HDR is thicker. It's a deeper bit depth, so the media is going to be taking up more space. And then, there's the question of bandwidth versus system speed and GPU capacity to undo that. So a lot of times, especially as people begin getting into 4K, they have to start not just rethinking the storage and the connectivity, but their overall workflow. So if you've got 40 terabytes of storage and it's going from HD to 4K, are you just now suddenly needing 160 terabytes of storage at that same speed with the right bandwidth? Or do you start thinking about, what do I actually need to deliver at these particular speeds? Can I work in a proxy workflow up until the point where I need to finish? So there's a couple of interesting questions that pop up there. And I'm assuming also in a stadium, some of that stuff would be driven by, have we changed the stadium monitors from has the resolution changed there?
Yeah. For us, in 2006, we weren't HD. When we were built, we were SD, which was the right decision at that time because the equipment just would have not lasted very well. So yeah, we jumped in. We jumped in right before 1080, 60p. So we were still 1080i. So we're definitely, and most stadiums do run, behind what a leading production facility would do. We just don't have the need for 4K. I mean, it's still argumentative about 4K video boards. The resolution doesn't, it wouldn't exist looking at it across the football field. So there's a lot of interesting things about that. I mean, I know the Rockies are HDR. Their board is HDR compliant, but they run through all the issues of that too, where a lot of their equipment that they renovated back in 17 or so wasn't compliant with being able to do true HDR. So we get most broadcast baseball games are 720. So we end up being what is given to us a lot of times, and we try to evolve and maybe have some special projects that we do in 4K or so, but it's a slow process for us. But you're right. I mean, our storage, even though we have a lot of it, isn't gonna, if we start acquiring in 4K, that's going instantly, and the bandwidth that we have with the, Ethernet over fiber, it's good, but it may not be. We may have to rethink that and the way to get the bandwidth back through to make it work well with our workstations.
Understandable. Question from Paul. Can you speak to TPN compliance and cloud-based storage? Has the TPN approved any cloud solutions? So I'll jump in on that one. TPN is Trusted Partner Network. They are the entity that assesses for security for a large number of Hollywood productions. I honestly don't know if they've assessed cloud storage environments and have approved them. The typical cloud storage environment, if it's secured the way it's supposed to be by the, as the cloud providers recommend, is usually it's less of a security risk than having the same kind of storage on-prem. So we can check back on that, unless Chad's got any information that I don't. But we can check on that and get back to you, on the chats on that. The thing I do know is you have to notify cloud providers if you are going to run security assessments against their infrastructure. Otherwise, they're going to react badly. So that has to be planned and programmed out with your cloud providers. So there's definitely ways to do it, whether or not it's an official certification. Not sure if that exists, or if it's done instance by instance, depending upon your particular bucket. Any other thoughts on that one?
No, not too much. I think that a lot of what you said is essentially true, where it is make sure that you're notifying if you're doing security tests and stuff like that. But that also, the TPN also likes you to do that. So it's not something that I've had to come up with personally, or come in contact with personally, but it's definitely something that I think we're going to have to look forward in the future, because so many people are looking into cloud now that it's definitely something we're going to have to look at.
Sounds good. Nicholas is asking, what setup would you recommend for a company that has production and editing locations in Southern California and in Boston, with the ability to add work from home editors? Assume Adobe Premiere, but may add Resolve 2 to 5 years. I'm assuming 2 to 5 years is the game plan for that. Any thoughts on that one?
As we were talking about earlier, especially if you work from home, HP RGS is an excellent solution. If you've got an HP Z machine, that RGS license is free to use. There's going to be that you've got your Z machine locally wherever your on-site workstations are going to be, and you can use whatever client you want. For the client that's working from home, you can kind of get around this. If you've already got a Mac infrastructure and it's Intel based, you can still use Boot Camp to then run RGS, but you've got to purchase licenses. As mentioned before, if your Mac, it's also Jump Desktop has been pretty great. Teradici has a solution, but it's difficult to implement in our experience. But then if you're Premier based, then you've got a whole bunch of different storage solutions that you can implement. And as long as you've got a solid VPN and if you've got RGS in place, you've got a pretty good working workflow that's available to you.
Exactly. So there's some interesting solutions out there that can let you stream directly from the cloud. LucidLink is one of them. There's also solutions that allow you to create proxies and move those to disparate locations and then do your finishing, like Nomad from our friends at SNS. There's a couple interesting streaming technologies that are out there and about to come online from different folks. The one thing that is going to be interesting there is because you're talking about two different sides of the continent of the United States. So having a single data center where you're trying to feed everything out from, you're going to have latency, one way or the other. So, I mean, it's possible to pick a data center in the center of the country and, have equal latency going to both, possibly with, remote stations in the cloud, or like Chad was talking about, you set up a co-located data center. Got to stop using the slang, to have your storage and your systems together, and then folks are just remoting in and controlling those. Your environment's still entirely self-contained in that colo or in that cloud, but folks are just remote controlling it from the outside. Question from Mark Rodanis. Mark, good to hear from you. Has the chip shortage hit this slice of the industry? Are delivery lead times for these products extended way into the future? The answer is yes for some. One of the difficulties we've been running into isn't necessarily with storage itself, it's with switch infrastructure. So lead time on switches has risen dramatically. We've actually had people that have said, can you just get some flippers and go out by the container boats and find our stuff and get it? But there's some interesting solutions we can get around. We've had a couple folks who've talked about putting extra network cards in the back of, like an SNS chassis and being able to use the SNS as a switch. Other folks we've been talking about, refurbished infrastructure items as those are sitting in warehouses. And while they don't have the same warranty setup, they have the same functionality that they did, and they're running the latest versions of their software. So that's one of the ways around it. Any other thoughts on supply chain fun?
You talk about network switches are the big culprit right now. That we've got some crazy lead times for new Arista or Cisco switches. It's across the board, really. It's I was doing an install just recently where they asked, "Hey, we're looking about, our future and what should we be looking at?" And I said, "Well, we're installing 1 gig here, and you should be looking at 10 gig." They said, "Well, should we just do that now if we're going to install now?" And I was like, "Oh no, that's too late of a question now because the supply chain for switches is so lengthy right now." Getting a few, we did have. It seems to have been cleared up a little bit, but we were having some supply chain issues just getting new computers from out of the country coming in, which is to be expected with what's going on, especially in port of LA. And we eventually saw those come in, but I think that those were weeks, if not months, kind of back ordered after we had ordered that hardware.
So also one of the things, generally what we're seeing is the storage infrastructure itself isn't delayed, but the other thing we've had issues with are servers that sit around it. So say like you need a server that's going to run like an asset manager like CatDV, or something like Storage DNA to move stuff to and from LTO. Those servers are beginning to take more time to get. Though the spinning disks themselves, they seem to be arriving on time. The other thing also we're seeing is vendors are working around particular shortages. I know there's certain types of hard drives that have become extremely difficult to source. So a certain type and a certain size, but the size just above is available, or the size just below is available. So, we start having these discussions about, well, how about we go from 192 terabytes to 256, and you get the drives and you get everything on time. So there are ways, there are commercial ways to fix it, which means you might spend a little bit more money, or maybe a little less money, and you work out a different workflow. So there's things that we've been able to help folks through as we've gone forward into all of this. Let me take a look and see if there's anything else. Yes, there are. Niven Howie, ACE. Any info on hybrid systems where you have local copies of media automatically synchronizing with other editors? Anyone want to take a stab at that before I do?
I've got one solution in mind, but I haven't been able to really get my hands on it, so I don't know if I should speak to it. So yeah, if you want to take the lead on that, I'd say go at it.
Sure. We've had some success with using a storage DNA setup where media is copied to a cloud instance and then it's pushed out. There was a show that just recently finished that we were assisting with that. Single source of truth, living in a data center, and then everything bouncing off the cloud out to the editors. The challenge with that sometimes is, not everyone's internet connection is the same. So being able to, keep those in line. And there's some other interesting solutions out there, like LucidLink and some other stuff that's about to come out, where it's either cloud-based or it's from your on-prem, being able to feed data out, but being able to set up a caching setup. So I know I'm going to need this stack of files all the time. Why don't you cache them locally so I always have them available? And then when I ask for something new, or if the file has been updated in the background, say someone does color correction on it, I'm doing finishing, the color corrected version suddenly just replaces the non-color corrected version I've been using, and you're ready to go. So there's some of those solutions that are out there where you've got some local, but that it's as a cache. So it's not necessarily, hey, I've got this particular RED file or this particular QuickTime file that I'm using. There are chunks of data that you're grabbing all the time. And then Brother Rick is asking, and I think we kind of touched on this before, how secure is cloud storage these days? How vulnerable is it to ransomware? So one of the core things about a backup and ransomware is if you have a backup that's immutable, then you're covered. So an immutable backup means that I've written this backup, it's now been put into place. I have 30 terabytes of data, and I've got new little bits of data coming in, so it gets gradually larger. But you can't come in and erase and rewrite my files because they are locked in place. That is the piece that avoids ransomware. No one can go in and encrypt my data because you can't delete it in the first place, and you can't create new data unless you're the authorized user. So that's one of the ways to get around ransomware, whether it's on tape, and one of the things that's always been kind of an immutable thing has been LTO, where you handle the backups effectively because you can't encrypt an LTO unless especially if it's offline and not available. So that's one of those pieces. Any other thoughts on that particular bit of fun?
No, I think that the LTO is definitely a solid solution for that. There have been a few cases where it's, if you've got your data managed properly, some ransomware has been like, we now have it encrypted, and you're like, all right, format it and just restore it from backup. Again, if you're looking at the cloud version of that, you always have to remember that sending your data to the cloud is cheap, pulling it back down is expensive. In an instance of that, but then protection from ransomware, like you're saying, it's you have to have it where you are the only person that can essentially write to it, and in that is the best protection you can have currently. Yeah.
Yep. And Yeah, the immutable backup is the key there, whether it's cloud or disks, you have on-prem, or LTO, you have on-prem. So, Greg, Chad, a lot of thanks for joining me today and getting into the storage pool with everybody. And thanks to everyone out there for joining us today. If you've got questions about storage, you can put them in the chat, or you can reach out to us here at Keycode Media. We've got a team of folks that can work on that for you, and you can dive into products, which we were trying to avoid here, but you can get into specific solutions that might be perfect for you. Thanks for joining us today. See you all later.
It's been great. See you guys.